Hello everyone, dear viewers. Our guest for Existential Conversations is Prof. Dr. Şaban Ali Düzgün. Welcome, teacher.
Thank you.
How are you?
We were good. We saw you. We got better.
Thank you very much. We thought of the title of this program as Ontology Conversations, but I think you prefer the word existence. What is the difference between the structure of human beings and their existence? How do you define it?
Yes, there are questions asked in the middle of this book. It was exactly like that. The word ontology has a history of 500 years. We know existence a little bit more recently. It is a word used by contemporary philosophy. In fact, these are designations. In other words, we need to look at what these designations represent and correspond to. The reason I prefer existence is that we are talking about a history in which man takes an active role as an active subject in existence. This is man's own personal history. We have always talked about existence, philosophy. When it comes to existence, the first thing that comes to mind is, for example, the existence of the universe, the existence of a cause. When you look for it, if you are a supporter of a philosophy that transcends the existence of this universe, as you know in immanent philosophy, the universe is self-sufficient. It is based on its existence as a cause. If you are looking for a metaphysical foundation, a transcendent foundation, you say that the reason must be outside the universe and you go to a concept of God, a creator. In any case, in the discussion of existence, either the universe or we encounter entities, areas of existence that transcend us, such as Allah, God. However, on the top of the Temple of Delphi, it says something like this on its door. Man knows himself first. Let man know himself. It is also narrated in a hadith. He who knows himself knows his Lord. In fact, when you realize your own limitations, for example, the idea of an unlimited being also begins to come to life. When you realize that you are mortal and feel the anxiety, all these things that this creates in you, the idea of what it means to be an immortal being awakens in you. Therefore, the divine, the metaphysical are rooted in you in a sense. This goes beyond being just a field where you philosophize, where you produce information. It becomes something that you feel, sense, and internalize. What I call existence is not just a philosophy. Existence is really the story of the formation of man.
So we are talking about a process.
We are talking about the process, but there is the name of my latest book, The Pain of Existence. Because there are many factors that you have to struggle with in order to exist. Because a person is sent to this world with certain potentials. We all have these potentials. What I call nature as a human being is the pool of these potentials. But in order for these potentials to come out, either someone holds your hand or on the contrary blocks them. There are many elements that you have to struggle with in order to exist. There I say it comes across as a big problem area. It could be your family, it could be your geography, it could be your culture, it could be your tradition, etc., etc. You can make it bigger. Therefore, in order to exist, you need to have a determination to struggle. You need to know your limits. How far can you go? As they say, a person should know their limits. I also say that a person should exceed their limits if possible. This does not mean that. In other words, you are saying it as a potential. Of course, potential, think like this. I don't know how many seconds it takes me to run 100 meters, but a person runs in 8 seconds. You say, think exactly about the incompleteness of all these given things that should have exceeded their limits. That it is not whole, that man completes what is missing by contributing to the process of formation, that he is here to complete, and that he either achieves his honor, dignity, honor, and glory by doing this completion, or on the contrary, he goes to the purity of his glory by diminishing what exists. Look, there are people like us on earth, different religions, different ethnic origins, different colors. Everyone has a different story, but there is one thing we know. Everyone is given a chance once. That chance is the chance to complete whatever is missing. Now look at the world. What is missing? Is there hunger? There is. So a very large portion of people who should be full at least are not full. Look, chance. What is that? Feeding people. A large portion of people are deprived of their freedom. Think about it. He is born in a concentration camp and dies there. What potential will you talk about?
So are you talking about this individually or socially?
Now, what I want to say is this. Now, the world we live in, these human criteria that I mentioned, what are human criteria? A person must be free. A person who is not free, that is, a person who does not own himself, does not have property only to own a house. First, a person must own himself. In order to own property, he must first be fed. He must not be dependent on anyone. Now, this is the minimum standard for all people. There are two basic philosophies that the Holy Quran said when it first came. There are two basic goals. Everyone will be free and everyone will be fed. Now, this philosophy of freedom and the philosophy of fighting hunger actually means this. The history of humanity progresses with these two criteria, prosperous societies. They can be mentioned here with two basic criteria. One, they are free, they are absolutely free. And secondly, they are absolutely well fed, they do not need anyone. The rest means that those who think they are free are actually not free, and those who think they are well fed are actually not well fed. Therefore, there are two basic grounds here for people, religions, ideologies that claim to be a civilization to be tested, the society they live in, the society they create, the society they bring into being, how free people are, how satiated people are. It may seem like a very material reference, especially how satiated they are.
Freedom actually seems to be both material and economic freedom. Satiety also seems to have a material infrastructure.
But in fact, if you ask me, religions emerge as a focus that consoles and postpones expectations, and the accusation that they alienate the world from us, like Friedrich Nietzsche in the West, postpone our expectations that should be realized in the world to the afterlife, and thus console us, is actually confirmed in a way. In other words, the idea of the afterlife of a religion that cannot make a person belong to this world is actually fictional. The main reason for explaining the afterlife in such detail is that the descriptions of heaven show this. Creating a simulation of that heaven in this world is your utopia. In other words, what is Thomas More's utopia? He has a utopia. But he established such a utopia that when he was the Prime Minister of the King of England, they took his head. So that utopia was a utopia that once poured match water on the roots of the kingdoms and he lost his head. What should be the utopia of a believer? A believer, he should establish a world like heaven. Otherwise, sir, if you live here poor, needy, in need, there is the Mutazila Ivaz theory. In other words, there will be a price for this. You will be given more than enough in the afterlife. There is a word beyond making disparagement literature and producing the philosophy of poverty and poverty for people. I couldn't think of it. There is no point in praising it. The word asceticism is mentioned once in the Quran, and it is mentioned to criticize. In other words, what I want to say is this. The area we call existence is not an area given to man. It is something expected from man. Man will be the master and implementer of the project that God has set for the earth. There is a very big responsibility. We always discuss the area of existence with God. There is no discussion there about the existence, unity, and grandeur of God. But I say let's discuss existence, not existence. The area we call existence is an area where expectations are created from man and the basic directions are given by the Quran. Which of his potentials will he actualize? How will rights and law be realized when he lives with other people? How will the idea of a higher being, the idea of God that he can rely on while living his life, that he will be free from all his worries, fears, and concerns, show him the way and guidance here, right? A man who comes to a crossroads and has no information about which way to go at a crossroads makes him nervous. The world meets us, brings us together, and we see in every sense with much bigger crossroads than that crossroads. When we take all these into consideration, a world that exists when a person does and is incomplete when he doesn't, a world that has been entrusted to us. It means that we are faced with a moral world, a completely moral world where both good and bad deeds are attributed to people, where people are charged for them. In other words, I will not charge my deeds to a higher authority such as the divine under any circumstances, because I have constructed myself as a free being, as a responsible being. I am talking about a person who can distinguish good from bad, thus has the idea of morality, thus has the idea of knowledge and science, distinguishes the legal from the illegal, thus can establish a judicial system. In other words, a person who has all the intellectual inputs needed to establish the idea of a system. In that case, why is there no mechanism that will allow him to charge someone else for what happened to him? Our tradition has created such a culture that it says good and evil are from Allah. How wrong! If you look at the verses of the Holy Quran, it repeatedly says that good and good deeds are from Allah and evil is from the person himself. In other words, a person who cannot attribute evil to himself can shamelessly charge Allah, whom philosophy defines as the highest good, as absolute good, as mazza good, sum bonum for an evil done. If we come to the area I call existence, it is a moral, ethical area with clear boundaries and a being who has the knowledge of what causes a person touches and what results will occur, and therefore has the opportunity to see ahead. It is a completely responsible area of existence. That is why I prefer existence, and I think that the world stands before us as a world of objects of that existence, as an area of opportunities given to man as an active and effective agent. Every deficiency, every poverty is an opportunity for us. We will complete it and gain the honor of being human. Just like in other places, they do not give the man his name. After achieving a great event, they say that you have earned the right to take a name according to that event. That is why the Holy Quran distinguishes between a human and a human. A human defines the material side of a human. A human shows his complementary side. A human is complete, and the moment we make that complement, we pass the test of existence.
In other words, we are not born as humans. We are always in an effort to complete our existence in order to become human. I would like to touch on the respect for existence here a little again. It is about the definition that you mentioned in your book, which gave your book its name. Actually, something more about today's psychology comes to my mind here. The science of psychology, psychotherapy, is seen as a field that people turn to in order to find and know themselves. It is seen as a guide for people to find their existence, their unity themselves. I understand it as using the Quran. But of course, we can also benefit from different fields and sciences here. But I also see it as turning to psychology more today. Whatever you want to say about this.
Now, that psychology, of course, is a structure that controls or does not control a person outside of the material structure of a person, which has been known since ancient times as psyche, coming from Greek philosophy. In the discussion of whether it exists or not, as you know, in the philosophy of Descartes, the spirit and matter, or the body and spirit of a person, are two independent, completely independent areas of existence. They do not even interact. They are separate, completely separate. But our tradition, the tradition of theology, accepts the existence of the spirit. A person has a spirituality, but that spirit, that spirituality is connected to the body of a person, and it is destroyed with the destruction of the body. When you are resurrected, you are returned there. They also explain the verses of Nuiduhu, we return in the Quran, as the return of the spirit to the body, the resurrection. The issue is that in order to understand what happens to a living person after death, we need to understand a living person, and we know that the Quran mentions a body of a person, his brain, his mind. That brain is a piece of flesh, but there is a mind that is produced independently of the piece of flesh. That mind has activities, all those activities that we call reasoning, contemplation, deliberation, tazakkur, that is thinking backwards, thinking forwards, thinking by combining the two. You can think of these in forms that the Quran does not even mention. All of these are activities of the mind. So does a person have an emotional world outside of the mind? Yes, there is. The place of the emotional world is shown as the heart in the Quran. There is a very beautiful verse in the Surah Kahf that establishes this connection. When he talks about his young cave friends, he says that they were a group of young people. They were a group of young people who believed and trusted in their Lord. Because of this trust, we also use their knowing abilities. Their guidance is actually used in the sense of a mind. The ability to know is an epistemic definition. We increased their knowing abilities. Then we connected this knowing ability to their emotional world. In other words, first you know something and then you need a motivation to do what you know. In order for that motivation to exist, in other words, for you to take action, what I call becoming is action. Being is static, it stops, becoming flows. In order for you to accompany the flow of existence, you need a very strong motivation. In order for motivation to exist, what is in the mind must be connected to the heart, in other words, to your emotional world. Then the companions of the cave say, 1, they trusted in their Lord. Due to this, we increased their knowledge. Then we connected that knowledge to their hearts. Then they stood up. Gamo. This whole process had to be completed before the men could stand up and say something. It is understood from here that this philosophy exists in Jewish philosophy, for example, in philosophy. This is always looked at in hermeneutical readings. In other words, the man says that the text of the Quran or the Torah has a triple structure. The Torah has a triple structure, just like the triple structure of man. Man has a body, a soul, and a spirit. Some verses address the body, some verses address the soul, some verses address the soul. Then he says that we need to read the Torah in at least 3 layers. Therefore, each of the verses that address man's emotional world, mind, and world of action are different. This is the question you asked. In other words, what you call psychology is also what we call the human body psychosomatics. Psycho meaning you feel something and it hits your body, the body we call soma. Man has a spiritual world, and when you want to do something, you need to address this world of man. This is what separates people from each other in a sense. So think about it this way. Let's say a poor person or a needy person on the road, someone who has fallen down, someone we really need, people pass by. In other words, as they pass by, a person turns and asks how they are, supports them, what draws that person there. It is mostly empathy, emotion. A world of emotions is shared with them from there. Therefore, as motivation, that is, as a power that drives them to action, which is also a very serious thing in philosophy, is the power of motivation a theological thing? Is motivation theological? In other words, is it a theological religious instinct that pushes a person to be moral? Or is it just knowing? Is it philosophical? In the discussion, motivation pushes people to moral actions with a theological religious power. Therefore, the spiritual structure of man, that is the areas we can control, address, and satisfy in man, and then integrate those areas, what we call monotheism, is ultimately the psychological structure of man. Man has a world of action, a mindset, but man is a being after all. When you say man, he consists of all of these. Their agreement is essential. In other words, man is a being of knowledge in his entirety while he is alive. I know my life with his knowledge and I continue my life. It is not like that. You see, man gets emotional, gets happy, gets sad. If man leaves himself to the world as a being of emotion only, there is a problem there too. This mediocre society, mediocre ummah is what the Prophet named it. In other words, mediocre actually means the middle of everything. In other words, in the mind, our emotions and our emotional world both create us and make us feel that we are human. In other words, this phenomenon of a person getting upset, no matter how cruel or arrogant he is in the face of an event, when he gets upset, he becomes human. You are human. In other words, these are micro touches that remind people of their humanity. We have ultimately received a share from Allah, the nature of Allah. In other words, when Allah's nature is mentioned in the Rum Surah, He mentions that He created people on that nature, a person created on the nature of Allah. This means that He knows, sees, is affected, empathizes, is sad. The human being who creates is such a being, but at the same time, when a person exceeds his own limits, he sees that he harms other people and immediately withdraws to his own limits. That is what we call repentance, to his own limits, a being who returns again. He is a completely dialectical being. In other words, he has his own internal conflicts, his own questions. With all these, the story of existence, in the end, you are how you interpret life and yourself. There is a saying that the world, the universe, is not made of atoms but of stories. We do not only discuss why the world came into being, how it was created. This pragmatic morality is the basic philosophy of William James. In other words, you live in a world after all, and the results you create, bring into being, actually create the world. In other words, why did I come to this world? Do I have a purpose? It is not like that. You do something, what you do becomes the world itself. Now, if you feed this person, the man is full. If you do not feed him, he dies of hunger. The one who is attached to you, the results of your actions. In other words, James's pragmatist philosophy does not focus on causes, it focuses on results. After all, you do something and it creates. Now, this is the activity in this existence. Has a power been transferred to man by the divine? It has. If it had not been, we would not have been subject to so many expectations, so many addresses such as, why don't you do it, do it, do it. Since all these things have happened, the expectations from us are high, and we have all the equipment within us to meet that expectation. Either we will exist in this world by doing what is required by that equipment, or we will cripple the equipment that we have with that equipment, and in the end, we will be the losers. The Holy Quran calls it Ya Hasraten alel Ibad. It is full of people who squander the opportunities given to them, do not fulfill what is required, and in the end say, oh, what have I done? That is what he calls longing, an opportunity that is missed and cannot be brought back again. Every moment we miss is like that, dear Fatma. Really. In other words, humans flow. We accompany the flow. There is no way yesterday can come back. In other words, there is a huge universal time. We divided it down to the second, the millisecond. Why? Because we want to control it. In other words, humans existed like that. That's the reason for all our divisions. Time is passing, and we have made a big difference between the moment we started half an hour ago and now. Is that right? So what we call existence there is the story of the person who injects meaning into existence.
Thank you very much, teacher.
You're welcome.
It was a nice conversation about human existence.
You're welcome.
Dear viewers, see you in the next episode.